Should you start a podcast in 2024? Yes and no. You probably clicked on this video because you either have a podcast already or you want to start one. In the next 5 to 10 minutes, I'm going to help you decide if a podcast is right for your business or if it would be a waste of time and money, because it takes a lot of either time or money to do a successful podcast. If you can do it all yourself, it takes a lot of time. If you have the money, it takes a lot of money, but not all that much time. If you are a small business or a coach, a financial advisor, something where in your career you need to have people trust you and they come to you for advice, you could start a podcast that will give you a really good return on investment. If you are creating this podcast because you love a topic, but you don't have a product, you can still have a successful podcast, but I wouldn't work with a podcast production company. Do 100 episodes and you'll have a successful podcast because your passion will carry you through that. It's not the most profitable way to build a podcast, and it's not the quickest way to build a podcast. You hear the common phrase, the best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago. The second best time is right now. It's the same with podcasting. If you are going to want a podcast with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of downloads, it's probably too late. Not that you can't do it now, but you should have started about 10 years ago. And to get to that point, it's going to take 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years to start to get traction. You're going to have to push through for 100 episodes. But if you have a small business or you're a coach, we have a shortcut. You don't need tens of thousands of downloads. You need a few hundred from the right people. So that kind of brings me to my first question. Is it too late to get into podcasting? The short answer is no. It's not. You'll hear a lot of people say that it's saturated. There's millions of podcasts out there. And technically, they're right. There are millions of podcasts. But in all honesty, there's a few 100,000 at any given time that are actually producing podcasts. See, in podcasting, there's a term called pod fade. And it means that podcasters get excited. They start building their audience, building their show, and they're consistent for a few weeks. And then they stop. It's done. You never hear from them again. Their RSS feed is there. And just an RSS feed is the technology that makes a podcast a podcast. So it syndicates that out, kind of like old syndicated talk radio, and it syndicates it out to all the players. That's a little technical detail. We don't need to get into that. That's not something that should be your concern right now. You need to figure out if it's right for you. Typically, when you look at pod fade, the issue is people don't have systems. They don't have consistency. And that's a YouTube video that we'll put together in a few weeks, how to put systems in your podcast and how to use software to make things easy to do. It still takes time to produce a good podcast. You have to have a project manager or do it yourself. You have to have calendar links and schedule and book interviews, record audio, record video, edit audio, edit video, all of that. Takes some time. But there are ways you can make it a little bit more manageable, and we'll go through those. But what you really need to do is build that system. But before you build that system, you have to know, who are you talking to? And that kind of brings me to the second main question that people ask me when they're thinking about building a podcast, and that's, how big do I need to be to make this podcast worth it? Not as big as you think is the answer. You don't need tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of downloads. You need a few hundred. If you can get a few hundred downloads, which anyone can get in 3 months to 4 months of consistent podcasting, you can get there, and it's the right people, you're going to start getting leads in your business that are going to generate a lot of money. We have a client, Casey Garrett. I'll put a link to her in the description below, but she's in the microdosing space, and she used our podcast launch process to basically build out her paid community. It has filled her paid community. It has every single new person she onboards says that they listen to her podcast. And they didn't all come from the podcast. Some of them found her elsewhere, but that's the beauty of podcasting. The beauty is that it engages your current audience too. If you're creating the right content, it's also good for them. So that means you need to make sure you're creating the right content. And how do you do that? You talk to your audience. You talk to your clients. Take a minute. Think about the best client you have. That person that just came to your mind. They are just a joy to talk to. You're excited when they're on your calendar. They pay you well. You provide a really good service that's beneficial to their business. That client. And then think of what they need. Build a podcast that helps them. Take some time to think through 2 to 3 potential ideas for your show, whether it is teaching the topic you already teach, whether it is helping them figure out what books to read to really succeed in their chosen career, whatever it is, you know what it is. I can help you. And if you book a call below, I can help you walk through that. We can set up some time to put you through our coaching process to get the right audience. But really, you don't need that. You can do it on your own by reaching out to that client that you were thinking about that is just fantastic. Put together 2 or 3 topic ideas, 2 or 3 ideas for a style of podcast, whether it's going to be you talking kind of like this, whether it's a YouTube channel style or an interview style. Maybe you're going to interview experts that would help your current audience as well. Think through a few of those, send them to that client, and then reach out to 2 or 3 other clients. Good clients. Don't reach out to your bad clients. You don't want to attract them, but ask them, would this provide value? Is this something that you would see yourself listening to? If it is, then you're on the right track. Build that podcast, share it with them. Maybe they'll share it with their audience. And then you've got a thriving podcast in 3 to 5 months. So, should you build a podcast in 2024 for your business? In short, it works well for a lot of people. There are a lot of businesses that should have a podcast. There are some podcasts that might not have an ROI, but are really fun to do. People enjoy them. And that's great. Don't let me stop you. Those are the podcasts we need. That's the beauty. You can kind of find the other people who have your niche interest. They're out there. And you have to find them. It might take a while. That's why you have to do 2, 3, 4 years. But it doesn't take that much to produce a podcast if you have the passion. You'll be interested in the topic. You'll want to have those conversations. But if you have a business, you need a podcast. In 2024, you need to be building a podcast. You need to be reaching out to people through means other than just social. Social's good, and we use social in our podcast. But in podcasting, you can control your audience. No one can change the algorithm, and next week, everyone's gone. That doesn't happen, except for Apple maybe could do that. Spotify maybe could do that. But the beauty is there's no one who controls most of it. There's a lot of podcast players. So even if they completely change their algorithm, there's not really a way that they can hurt your business. So in 2024, podcast makes sense for a lot of people. If this sounds like something that might be a good fit for you, reach out below, comment, and always remember, like and share this video if it provided value to you, because there might be a couple other people in your network who are thinking about a podcast too. They think it's saturated. It's not. If they think that and they watch this and they still think that, below I'll have a link to book a call with me and I'll convince them. It is not saturated. Thank you. See you next week.